I recently attempted a hardcore Nuzlocke of a lasagna. Now, as you're watching this video, I imagine it's because you probably know what a Nuzlocke is, and you're wondering, what do you mean you did that to a lasagna? Well, it's actually pretty straightforward. I invented a new kind of Nuzlocke that I'm calling a ChefLocke. A ChefLocke is played just like a hardcore Nuzlocke, but with a few additional rules to make it a little more challenging and a lot more delicious. To start, pick a game that you want to Nuzlocke and a recipe that you want to make when you win that Nuzlocke. Throughout the game, all of your encounters will be named for an ingredient in that recipe, and when you win the challenge, you'll make that recipe with whichever ingredients survived the challenge. Seems pretty straightforward, but here are some stipulations to illustrate what makes a ChefLocke more challenging. At the beginning of a ChefLocke, you must identify every possible ingredient that you would include in your recipe, and you're only able to catch as many Pokémon as you have ingredients. Even if the game you're Nuzlocking has 50 encounters in it, if you're making a recipe with only 20 ingredients, you're only allowed to catch 20 Pokémon. This makes a ChefLocke more challenging than a Nuzlocke because you have to think a lot more strategically about what encounters you're even going to go for in the first place. But wait, there's more. Once you've listed all your possible ingredients, identify amongst them your foundational ingredients. These are the ingredients that your recipe just couldn't be made without. For instance, in a chocolate chip cookie ChefLocke, it's safe to say that chocolate chips would be a foundational ingredient. These are the only encounters that you're required to catch in order to complete the challenge. If you somehow manage to get all the way through Victory Road in your fried rice ChefLocke without catching a Pokemon named Rice, hiya! Well, you're not allowed to enter the Elite Four until you do. To keep things interesting, you're required to have at least one foundational ingredient in your party at all times. And if at any point in the game, any one of your foundational ingredients faints, that is a full wipe of the challenge, and you have to start over. This is the first ever attempt of the first ever ChefLocke.
Let's go!
Our journey begins in Professor Oak's lab, where we meet our starter Pokemon and foundational ingredient, Noodle the Squirtle. A quick tackle fest ensues, and we walk away with our first win against our rival. One quick errand later, and we catch our first encounter, a Rattata named Oregano on Route 1. We pick up Garlic the Mankey on Route 22, a Weedle named Fennel on Route 2, and then challenge our rival for an optional fight back on Route 22. We pick up the one without too much trouble, and continue on to catch Carrot the Caterpie in Viridian Forest, our last potential encounter before the first gym. After getting the whole team up to the level cap of 14, and fully evolving Carrot and Fennel, we proceed to take on Brock. Already at the first gym, we've built up a pantry of crucial aromatics, the loss of any of which would be heartbreaking, not to mention the foundational Noodle. But who are we kidding? Brock is a cakewalk as always. We lead with Garlic the Mankey. He chops up Brock's Geodude and deals some chip damage to Onix before we switch in Noodle, who takes him out with his Pasta Water Gun, which gets a needless critical hit for some salt in the wound, because of course, our Pasta Water is well salted. However, our victory is soon clouded with grief, as we lose Fennel the Beedrill to a critical hit from this lass's Rattata. Sorry to Fennel and to our taste buds for this avoidable loss. Shortly after this devastating loss, we pick up Celery the Spearow on Route 3 and head into Mount Moon, where we catch Sage the Zubat. We then catch Basil the Ekans on Route 4 and proceed to challenge our rival on Nugget Bridge. We honestly struggle against his Pidgeotto before narrowly taking him out with Noodle, but the rest of his team goes down more smoothly. Noodle evolves into War Turtle as a reward, and we proceed to pick up our next few encounters. Bayleaf the Pidgey on Route 24, Parsley the Oddish on Route 25, and finally, Sugar the Meowth on Route 5. Oregano and Parsley evolve as we hit the level cap of 21, which puts us in good shape to take on Misty. Parsley tears through Misty's Staryu with ease, and then proceeds to stand toe-to-toe with her Starmie, avoiding confusions from their water pulses before eventually taking the win for a clean sweep from Parsley. A mere Garnish has won us our second gym badge, and we're off to pick up our next encounter. After picking up the Old Rod, we catch Anchovy the Magikarp on Route 6, and with the level cap at 24, we immediately fully evolve him and Celery. We meet Pork Rib the Drowsy on Route 11, and then Redwine the Diglett in Diglett's Cave. Time for another fight with our rival on the SS Hand. Celery starts the battle with a 5-hit Fury attack, and the once pesky Pidgeotto goes down with no trouble at all. Anchovy chomps away at his Raticate, and then Noodle noodles his way through confusion to land a solid bite on his Kadabra. We switch in Celery, who takes him out with a Pursuit, and he's left with his final Pokemon Ivysaur, who Celery takes out easily with 2 pecks. Proceed to Weird Back Rub. Now with the HM for cut, we're able to take on Lieutenant Surge for our next badge. We lead with Garlic with his patented Pungent Punch, who takes out Lieutenant Surge's Voltorb. We switch in Parsley to put his Pikachu to sleep, in the hopes of preventing a runaway double team setup. But after switching in Redwine to Diglett, Lieutenant Surge proceeds to use a full heal on his Pikachu and sets up a second double team while we are in the ground. We whiff our dig and decide to switch in Basil to intimidate and paralyze this pesky Pikachu. He sets up a third double team, and we switch Redwine back in to nullify his Shockwave. He hits us with a -1 quick attack, and then Redwine proceeds to OHKO with a magnitude 6. We are in good shape as Lieutenant Surge switches in his Ace Raichu, but the same double team nonsense begins. We manage to successfully bring him to the yellow with a dig. He then hits us with a quick attack before Redwine brings home the win by connecting with a magnitude 8. Afterwards, we make the somewhat risky decision to get the HM for Flash, and on our way back, we pay for our hubris. One step away from the exit, as we encounter a beefed up level 29 Dugtrio. I sloppily hadn't even fully healed Noodle after his last battle, who gets trapped on the field by Sandtomb before we hit him with the Pasta Water Gun.
Oh no!
Which fails to take him below 50% of his HP. The Wild Dugtrio then lands a critical hit Sandtomb before we bring him down to the red with a second round of Pasta Water.
I'm in danger!
With clenched teeth, we watch and pray to avoid the critical hit. And manage to stay alive. Only to then be hit with an accuracy drop. Can we hit this last Pasta Water Gun? Yes, we can, and we narrowly avoid disaster in Diglett's cave. One heart attack later, we pick up Pecorino the Voltorb on Route 10, as well as White Wine the Geodude in Rock Tunnel. On our way through the tunnel, tragedy strikes as Red Wine, our Diglett, who had just won us our third gym badge, goes down to a critical hit from a mandatory trainer's Machop.
I will remember you.
Pork Rib and White Wine both evolve as the team hits level 25, and we proceed to take on our grieving rival in Pokémon Tower. White Wine handles his Pidgeotto with ease. Then Bayleaf takes out his Ivysaur. We then switch in our newcomer Pecorino to take on our rival's Gyarados. But despite being 4 times super effective, Pecorino's Spark only manages to bring him down to the yellow before Gyarados deals us our third loss of the run. In hindsight, it's obvious that this loss was totally unnecessary, as we could have switched in our Graveler White Wine, who would have taken at most neutral damage from Bite, as our rival's Gyarados doesn't even have any water moves at this point. We bring in White Wine to avenge Pecorino, and then we switch in Pork Rib to put his Kadabra to sleep. Noodle comes in to take him out with a critical hit Bite. In a ChefLocke, Noodle bites you. Sorry. A few hits of Pasta Water take out his Growlithe, and we get the win. Afterwards, we get a guaranteed Growlithe encounter on Route 8, but after discovering it doesn't have the ability Intimidate, we decide to knock it out, and take one more shot at catching a Growlithe with Intimidate, as we're guaranteed another Growlithe encounter on the very next route. Luckily, that's just what we get. An Onion the Growlithe joins the team. We then pick up Parmesan the Eevee and Celadon City, pick up a few Evolution Stones from the department store. It's time now to take on Team Rocket. We uneventfully get through the puzzles and grab the lift key, which leads us to our first fight with the big boss Giovanni. Noodle one-shots his Onix and Rhyhorn in short order with a couple of Pasta Water Pulses. As he brings in his final Pokemon Kangaskhan, we switch in Anchovy to hit and Intimidate and take barely any damage from Fake Out. We then switch in Basil to hit another Intimidate, who takes a measly -2 Mega Punch. We then switch in White Wine, who can only be hit for neutral damage with Bite, but he manages to get flinched twice before landing an unimpressive Brick Break. We then bring Anchovy back in to hit a third Intimidate, who lands us the win by hitting 2 Dragon Rages. Anchovy has a powerful flavor and is not to be underestimated. We get our much needed SilphCo, and then to celebrate, we evolve Onion into Arcanine with the Firestone we picked up earlier at the department store. We also buy a TM for Flamethrower at the gate corner, which allows Onion to one-shot all 3 of Erika's Pokemon.
That was easy.
We use our Thunderstone to evolve Parmesan into Jolteon and return to Pokemon Tower, where we catch Pepperflake the Haunter. Noodle takes out the ghost of Cubone's mother with some Pasta Water Pulses, and we quickly save Mr. Fuji from Team Rocket. He rewards us with a Pokeflute for our efforts. We take a quick side trip to get some tea from an old lady, and we proceed to wake up the Snorlax on Route 16 with the most beautiful flute playing ever heard by man or mon. We managed to catch him without a problem and welcome our second foundational ingredient to our pantry, Tomato the Snorlax. We then take on the optional fighting gym without issue to win ourselves our newest encounter, Pepper the Hitmonlee. Now it's time to make our way through the Team Rocket-infested SilphCo, where we're confronted one more time by our rival. Parmesan, the king of cheeses, pummels his puny Pidgeot with a one-hit KO Thunderbolt. And then instead of going for the quad super effective Thunderbolt against Gyarados, I pulled this nonsense. In hindsight, I was clearly traumatized from Pecorino's death in our last rival fight after a Spark failed to bring our rival's Gyarados to the red, but Jolteon is better than Voltorb and Thunderbolt is better than Spark, and I clearly made a suboptimal play. We do manage to take Gyarados out and then proceed to cook his Venusaur with our Onion, but it fails to take him out before our Onion is put to sleep. So we bring in Porkrib, who eats a Razor Leaf. Venusaur then goes for Sleep Powder again.
Call an ambulance!
However,
But not for me.
we are free to take him out with a super effective Psychic. Porkrib then sweeps up our rival's last two Pokemon without issue. Our starter Noodle reaches his final evolution just in time to take on Big Boss Giovanni one more time. Porkrib takes out his Nidorino and Nidoqueen by spamming Psychic, and then White Wine breaks Kangaskhan brick by brick like we're building a friggin' brick oven over here. Sorry. Noodle one-shots his Rhyhorn with a Pasta Water Pulse. Bada bing! SilphCo is cleared! Alright, really, I'm sorry. I'll stop. We get our congratulatory Master Ball, and it's time to take on Sabrina. Unfortunately, I wasn't recording when we took on Sabrina, so this reenactment will have to suffice. Yeah, Porkrib the Hypno swept the whole team. None of her Psychic types can hit Porkrib for even neutral damage, and her Venomoth went down to 1 Psychic. Also, while I wasn't recording, we picked up our third foundational ingredient, Ricotta the Dodrio, as well as Mascarpone the Poliwag, and we evolved Parsley with our Leaf Stone. We also encountered a Nidoran in the Safari Zone, but he ran away immediately. Luckily, the cameras were back on in time for our fight with Koga, which goes more or less the same as our fight with Sabrina. Porkrib spams Psychic, and we win without issue. Afterwards, we pick up Olive Oil the Tentacool, and use our Master Ball on our final foundational ingredient, Salt the Dugong in the Seafoam Islands. We then proceed to fully evolve all our new friends and return to Pewter City to pick up the old Amber so that we can resurrect it on Cinnabar Island and add Sausage the Aerodactyl to our team. Our Pokemon Mansion encounter Coughing decides to unalive itself, but we managed to get the secret key without further incident. Now it's time to take on Blaine. We lead Mascarpone, who whiffs two Hypnosises. We missed twice, before we decide to switch up our strategy and set up the rain. Mascarpone then proceeds to one-shot his whole team with rain-boosted surfs for the win. Bill then tries to take us on a boring side quest, and we say no. We take a detour to the power plant instead and pick up Mozzarella the Magneton and proceed to the 8th and final gym for our last match against Big Boss Giovanni. Now, stop me if you've heard this one before. Mascarpone sweeps this entire team with surfs. One after one they fall, like so many grains of salt down the hourglass that is my kitchen timer. I can practically taste victory, and it tastes like lasagna. It's time for one more battle with our rival before we can make our way through Victory Road. His team prevents relatively little trouble. Mozzarella one-shots his Pidgeot. Next we send in Noodle, who after dodging a takedown, one-shots Growlithe with a Surf. He then brings in his starter Venusaur, and we pivot to Onion. He gets off an inconsequential Growth, and then Onion brings him to the red and lands a Burn with Flamethrower. And then he just uses Growth again, and we easily take him out with one more Flamethrower. We then pivot back to Noodle to take on his Rhyhorn, who easily tanks a takedown and responds with a one-shot Surf. We then switch in Mozzarella to take out our rival's Gyarados, and thankfully we dodge the crit as he does get hit with a Hydro Pump. But then Mozzarella squeaks out the one-shot with a Spark. We switch Porkrib in to handle Alakazam, who simply chooses to use Calm Mind twice in a row. A totally inconsequential move considering that Porkrib's Shadow Ball is actually a physical move in Gen 3, and with Alakazam's abysmal defense stat, Porkrib lands an easy one-shot, and the match is ours. After an uneventful trip through Victory Road, it's finally time to take on the Elite Four. With 6 ingredients, we face our final challenge. Parmesan the Jolteon, Tomato the Snorlax, Porkrib the Hypno, Onion the Arcanine, Ricotta the Dodrio, and of course, Noodle the Blastoise. All 6 delicious ingredients. 3 of them foundational ingredients, the loss of any of which would cause a full wipe for our challenge.
Before we take on the Elite Four, I just want to take a second to say thank you so much for watching the video. Be sure to hit the like button if you haven't already, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content like this, or if you want to be eligible for the giveaways that we do for our subscriber benchmarks. Right now, we're giving away this Shrouded Fable ETB to one of our first 500 subscribers, but if you're watching this video and we already hit that benchmark, just check my channel for the description. We'll definitely be doing some kind of giveaway for the next benchmark. Now, without further ado, here's the Elite Four.
We start our fight with Lorelei by just narrowly missing the one shot with Thunderbolt, but after using up her full restore, we manage to take out our Dugong with just a few more Thunderbolts. Parmesan then one-shots Cloyster and mops up her Slowbro with a Thunderbolt and then a quick attack. It's at this point that she brings out her Lapras, and I make the sloppy mistake of clicking quick attack instead of launching the Thunderbolt we were hoping to launch off, and we pay for that mistake when Parmesan gets hit with a Confuse Ray. I decided to switch out to Tomato to tank an Ice Beam. She then hits Tomato with a Confuse Ray, but Tomato pushes through to get off a Yawn. After tanking a Surf and snapping out of Confusion, Tomato hits a respectable Double Edge just before Lapras falls asleep. With Lapras asleep, we switch back to Parmesan, who takes Lapras out with a Thunderbolt. She then brings in Jinx, so we pivot to Onion, who then gets put asleep with a not-so-lovely kiss. For once, someone is making an Onion cry. She then hits our sleeping Onion with an Attract, but Onion, the absolute boss, wakes up and fires off a one-hit KO flamethrower through the Attract, because Onion isn't a simp. It's time now to take on the very shirtless Bruno. We lead with Noodle, who easily one-shots his Onix with a Surf. He brings in Hitmonchan, and we bring it into the yellow with another Surf before bringing in Porkrib. Porkrib knocks him out with a Psychic, and then one-shots his Hitmonlee with another Psychic. We decide to test how bad Onix's special defense really is by shooting off a punishing Psychic that actually does bring him into the red, but eat an Earthquake for our effort. Time to pivot to Noodle for free, predicting correctly that Bruno will opt to use his heal here, and then launch a one-hit KO Surf. He then brings in his final Pokemon, Machamp, and we respond with the speedy Ricotta. But after getting hit with a scary face, we get hit with a pretty brutal cross drop. Since we're outsped now, we have to switch out, as Ricotta is one of our foundational ingredients. So we bring in Onion to get off an Intimidate. He tanks a -1 cross drop and hits back with a Flamethrower for the second win of the league. Time to face Agatha. We lead Tomato, who manages to hit through a double team to land a Shadow Ball, which just barely misses the one shot. Agatha uses up her heal before we bring her back to the red with another Shadow Ball. She then lands a Confuse Ray, but Tomato hits through for the KO. She then brings in Golbat, who hits Tomato with an Air Cutter, but Tomato manages to avoid the flinch and snap out of Confusion to land a Yawn. We switch out to Parmesan one turn too early, who gets hit with a Confuse Ray, before pivoting back to Noodle. Noodle hits an Ice Beam to bring Golbat into the red, and then gets the KO with another one while Golbat stays asleep. Arbok hits Noodle with an Intimidate, but we opt to go for the -1 Earthquake anyway, doing just a little less than half. But we pick up the KO shortly after with the Surf. Agatha's second Gengar comes out, and successfully lands a Hypnosis on Noodle. We then pivot to Tomato, who tanks a Sludge Bomb, and fires back with a Shadow Ball. Tomato then gets put to sleep as well, but after just one Sludge Bomb, Tomato wakes up to KO Gengar with one more Shadow Ball. Agatha sends out her final Pokemon Haunter, who whiffs a Hypnosis and goes down to one last Shadow Ball. Tomato secures the win, and we're on to face Lance. He leads Gyarados, and we lead Parmesan, who easily takes him out with a 4-time super effective Thunderbolt. See how easy that was? We keep Parmesan in to chip away at Lance's first Dragonair. The first Thunderbolt does about a third, and after tanking an Outrage, another Thunderbolt does another third, and gets the Paralysis. One last Thunderbolt takes Dragonair out. Lance then sends in his second Dragonair, and we opt for one more Thunderbolt, and get hit with a Thunder Wave. We pivot to Tomato, who comes in for free on a Safeguard. Then after tanking an Outrage, Tomato takes the KO with a Double Edge. Tomato stays in and hits a Shadow Ball on his Dragonite, which manages to get a special defense drop. We then switch in Noodle, who shrugs off a Wing Attack to hit a 4-time super effective Ice Beam, picking up the KO. Lance then brings out his final Pokemon, Aerodactyl. We seem to be in good shape when suddenly...
No, God! No, God, please, no! No!
Aerodactyl gets an Omni Boost off his Ancient Power, raising all his stats at once. Noodle hits him with Surf, but it falls short of even bringing him to the red after the special defense boost. Luckily, Noodle's Citrus Berry activates, bringing him back into the green.
Nice.
With Aerodactyl's attack stat at +1, we're not really in a position to switch out. Noodle stays in to get hit with a +1 Hyper Beam. And in true nail-biter fashion, Noodle survives the hit, dodging the critical hit to survive on just 12 HP, securing the KO and the battle with one last Surf. That was way too close for comfort, but noodle remained firm and al dente. We head into the champion match against our rival, unpunished and deathless, ready to face one final challenge before we finally get to taste the sweet taste of our victory lasagna. The fight starts strong, with Parmesan landing a one-shot on his Pidgeot. We then bring in Noodle, who gets hit pretty hard with an Earthquake before taking the KO with a quad super effective Surf. He brings in a starter Venusaur, so we pivot to Onion, who comes in for free as Venusaur just absorbs sunlight. We outspeed and hit a Flamethrower, which manages to pick up the one-hit KO. Gyarados comes out, so we switch in Parmesan, who gets off relatively easy on a Hydro Pump and hits back for the one-shot. Alakazam comes out, and we switch in Pork Rib, a bona fide Alakazam repellent. Pork Rib the Hypno easily brushes off 2 Psychics and gets the one-hit KO with one last Shadow Ball. With our rival down to his very last Pokemon, Pork Rib stays in on a Flamethrower to land a Thunder Wave. We pivot to Onion to get off an Intimidate and get some chip damage with Extreme Speed. And we switch one final time to Tomato, who secures the KO and thus the run with one last Double Edge. And with that, we've won our very first attempt of the first ever ChefLocke. Victory is ours, and as sweet as it tastes in the moment, it's only gonna get tastier because it's finally time to cook this lasagna.
The lasagna that I'm making to celebrate winning my first ever ChefLocke is based on Frank Proto's recipe from this Epicurious video. I added more ingredients to my recipe than Frank uses in his, such as anchovies and mascarpone cheese, to expand the depth of flavor in my lasagna, and the amount of encounters I had available to me in the game. Here's how I made it, and how you can make it too. First, heat up some olive oil in a large, heavy pan, and brown your pork ribs on each side. Once they've got a nice color, set those ribs aside and add your sausage to that hot oil. I bought this spicy sausage from my local Italian grocery store. Make sure to take it out of the casing before putting it in the pan. You want to cook the sausage just long enough that the color changes, but avoid browning it too much, if at all, because it's about to cook much longer in our sauce. Once you've gotten it to a good color, go ahead and take that out as well and set it aside with your ribs. Now that we've got all this succulent pork fat in our oil, it's time to soften up our onions. Add a little salt to help draw out the moisture and speed up the cooking process a bit. After a few minutes, toss in your carrots, your celery, and your garlic. Once all the veggies have softened, this is when I threw in about 2 or 3 anchovies. It's totally optional, but your dish needs salt, and anchovies are ocean-flavored salt bombs. If you don't think you like anchovies, but you do like Caesar salad dressing, sorry to break it to you, you like anchovies. Pour in some white wine to help get all the brown bits off the bottom of the pot. You could also use red wine at this point instead, or both, which is what I was going to do had we not lost red wine to Diglett in Rock Tunnel.
I will remember you.
Once you've got the bottom of the pan deglazed, pour in your crushed tomatoes and stir everything together. At this point, add in your seasonings. I used pepper, a little bit of sage, oregano, and a couple of bay leaves. Put your ribs and sausage into the sauce, as well as your fancy bundle of basil. I definitely recommend fresh basil as opposed to jarred. I almost forgot to put in sugar or pepper flakes at all, but they did make it in there. The sauce is really the bulk of the recipe, and from here, construction is pretty straightforward. I used a mix of ricotta and mascarpone cheese and fresh chopped parsley, and topped that with shredded mozzarella and grated Parmesan. Now, for as many times as I talked about pasta water, I actually didn't boil my noodles in water. Some noodles might need a little cooking before the construction process, but these were made to cook in the sauce in the oven itself. Keep layering your cheese, your sauce, and your noodles until you run out of ingredients or space in the pan. Bake it for 30 minutes with some foil covering the pan, and then bake it for another 30 minutes with the foil off. And this is what it looks like when it's done. This is what victory looks like. It was the best lasagna I've ever tasted and one of the most unforgettable meals of my life. Thanks so much for watching. Keep cooking.